covering all 5 days.
Good evening, everyone. Apologies for breaking into your conversation. Welcome again to SIM Arizona's February event. We're absolutely thrilled to have you. Thank you so much for coming. Hope you enjoy the venue. We like these Fox restaurants. I think they do a very good job. Thank you, Fox Restaurants. Appreciate it. Exactly. Okay, before we get going, the little health warning that TJ is going to put up. We are going to record this, at least the online bit. So those of you who don't want being recorded, put your napkin over your head or whatever you want to do. All right, thanks. Next. Before we get going for the main event, I do want to just acknowledge and thank our annual sponsors, 2 of whom are here, of course. And in fact, RGP is both our silver sponsor and sponsoring tonight's event. So we're going to talk about that in a little second. And Expedient also. Can we just give a round of applause and our appreciation for those folks? And we also want to appreciate our enterprise members. So these are companies that invest in their staff development by having multiple SIM members from their teams. And we have quite a few of those, and a couple of those are definitely here this evening. So thank you so much for our enterprise members as well. Thank you. And of course, tonight is a sponsored event, and we really want to thank our good friends at Veracity, who are an RGP member, I should say, customer member, of course. So thank you again so much. Let's say a very special thanks to RGP and Veracity for this evening. Thank you very much. And they are going to be hosting a very interesting panel, and we're going to see that a little shortly. All right, just a couple of things we're going to cover before that, a little bit of chapter administration stuff before we get into the main event for the evening. We're going to just thank any guests that we've got joining us this evening. We're then going to have a little bit of chapter updates. There's a few things we want to talk about, including some upcoming events, which we want to make you aware of. As you know, being a part of SIM gives you access to a lot of other different events and things going on in the Valley. So we want to talk about those. And then there's going to be a little bit of a education update from our friend Dan, and I can see where he is, so that's great. And if you go back, so now I can't remember where you were. Oh, right, then of course the main program. So thank you very much. So I'm not sure how many guests we have that are not the RGP folks and the Veracity folks. I think we don't probably have any, right? So ordinarily we would shame them into saying who they are and what they do, but they're not here, so we'll skip that bit. Thank you very much. Oh, actually, I do want to say something about that slide though, right? So that's our December event, which was at the Culinary Dropout, which is another one of these places. And the fabulous gentleman in the Santa hat is here this evening, right? Where is he? Ah, there he is. And who said people working in healthcare are boring? Hey, well done. Thanks, Brett. I appreciate that. A good shout out for Blue Cross Blue Shield. Right, so those who haven't renewed your membership or yet, please do. Remember, you get a lot of stuff. This is a crazily cheap organization to be a member of, right? And you get a lot for it. You get these fabulous dinner events, you get great social events. We do things like give back events, and we do some incredible charity work. We also, of course, SIM as an organization gives back to the education of our STEM students, and Dan maybe will say a little bit about that as well. But we also have access to all the SIM national conferences, the interest groups, of which there are numerous. One is DigiRisk, which is very close to our heart because it's a sort of cybersecurity we also have our advanced practice council, which is a sort of leading cutting edge technology group that meets to discuss that. We have the Leadership Institute, which I'm going to talk a little bit about on the next slide. And we are also very soon going to be launching the CIO Enclave program. This is something that's been very successfully run in SoCal for many years and is now being adopted by SIM National and is being rolled out across all of our chapters. So this is a very elevated experience for our C-suite leaders in technology. And we'll talk a little bit perhaps on the next meeting. Okay, I just want to highlight this Leadership Institute. This is a very, very important part of being a SIM member. If you're, if you're a senior leader, you've already made it, okay? Your job is to develop the next generation of leaders. And SIM has 4 programs that take those leaders from the very, very beginning, the very first time they ever move into a leadership role or a managerial role, right the way up to an executive RLF. These are incredible programs. They're available as to you as being part of SIM members. Very inexpensive, very well regarded, particularly the RLF itself, which is taking the senior manager into their first executive leadership role. That is very nationally recognized. So please take advantage of that. Mr. Mazzola, over to you, sir. Dan is our Director of Education. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Thank you so much for everyone having, oh, this is no good. Okay, I'm going to walk over here. All right. Is this better? Yes, thank you. So I'm in the workforce development business, and we have a lot of things going on in my world in terms of workforce development and the earthquake, with this ChatGPT thing in education. You could imagine what's happening at institutions around the world. So we're working on those things. If you got any ideas on how we should address that, come talk to me. But tonight we have our SIM Scholar of the Month. So I'd like, if you could push the magic button, Shubham, come on up over here because we can't have you be over there. So one of the programs that we have is our Master of Information Systems in the WP Carey School of Business. We're ranked in the top 10 in the nation in terms of doing that leadership development in IT. And Shubham, you're here tonight as the SIM Scholar. So say hello to everyone. Don't look at the slide.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm looking at you guys. I'm not looking at the slide. I'm currently pursuing my master's degree in information system management from WP Carey School of Business. Prior to pursuing my master's degree, I had my own startup called Ascentry Solutions, which was into delivering software solutions to small and medium scale businesses in India. So majorly we focused on providing key KPI indicating dashboards, robotic process automation solutions, overall equipment efficiency solutions. This experience gave me an overall overview of how the software development lifecycle goes and what are the ups and downs from client acquisition to the product delivery. So the main learning from my entrepreneurial experience that I have is it's not about the technology you are giving to your client. It's about value you are delivering through your technology. So that was one of my takeaways from my experience. I'm set to graduate in July of 2023, and I'm open for opportunities as a business analyst, as a data analyst, as a consultant. So any of you guys who have any positions open, I'm there. I would like to thank Dr. Dan for giving me this opportunity to be as a student guest over here. Yeah, I'm looking forward to be a part of SIM. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. And that's an engineer that just spoke. So we do a good job of helping them understand. Well, I mean, no speeds and feeds at all, right? Value to customers. All right, so speaking of value, who gets the microphone next? Because I'm all right, there you go. Thank you.
Who else, my friend? Who else? Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. And well done. Congratulations. And so this is an engineer who's got entrepreneurial smarts as well, right? There's definitely somebody you want to be looking at. Great. So some of the chapter events that are coming up, Laura did remind me that there is actually something going on tomorrow, is it? Do you want to just talk about that just quickly? Sorry, I just did that when you took a mouthful.
So I know you get a ton of emails, but if you check your SIM Connect email that just came through again today, you will see a whole host of events coming up that are special interest groups. And the one tomorrow is the Rethink Everything, which to me is beyond fascinating. And it gets my mind reeling for at least 10 days after I attend one of these events. So check your SIM Connect email for the Rethink Everything and become part of that group. It really takes you out of your comfort zone and you do rethink everything.
Very good. Thanks for that, Laura. And some of the other events coming up, two of which really show the power of being connected through SIM, because so SIM is going to be part of this Elevate IT program. We're going to have a little booth there, so come and say hello to us. And that is free to SIM members. There is a code that is available, came out. I think it'll be in one of your emails, Laura. So that's happening on March 7th, March 8th. There is the SIM DigiRisk is the next panel, which is very interesting to me because it sounds almost like an oxymoron, right? Cyber program with a skinny budget. So if you want to know how to run your cyber program with next to no dollars, this appears to be the one you want to go for. So that's pretty cool. And then in March, so we're going to have our event. Our March event is actually, we are co-partnering the event with HMG, their CIO leadership, executive leadership forum. That's a whole day event at the Marriott Scottsdale. Again, that is free for us. That is a brilliant conference. I don't know how many people have gone to that HMG event. It is superb, right? So I do encourage you to go to that. All right, with that, I think we're ready to go to our main event. I'm very pleased to welcome Mark Deutsch, who's the Managing Director of Veracity that we already mentioned, and he is going to be leading a panel on something that, of course, we're all about as IT leaders, and that is digital transformations. And I'm going to get you to introduce your panel.
Thank you very much, Simon. And if you could, reposition yourselves to face this way, as well as we got a couple of our panelists are joining us remotely via Zoom. So we'll have some folks responding on the screen here, as well as a couple of panelists joining us live here up front. So with that, let me start by introducing all of our panelists. And I'm going to start with our folks that are online first. We can take a look at the screen over here. So at the top of your screen, or actually the second panel, let me introduce you to Jen Jones. Jen Jones is one of my colleagues from Veracity. And real quick, high level about who Veracity is to kind of put this in context before I introduce Jen, is that we're effectively the digital transformation arm of RGP. RGP is a global consulting firm that you'll hopefully have a chance to learn much more about, since RGP recently became a sponsor of the organization. And Veracity was acquired 4 years ago, just about 4 years ago, to help bring and expand more digital services to the organization. And part of what we do, I like to say, is we do a great job. Our secret sauce that Jen Jones has a lot to do with is to blend the experience, user experience, and design, human-centered design, in conjunction with technology and development. So very few firms, I think, can actually blend those two. And you'll see why that's important as we discuss today when it comes to digital transformations. And the topic I chose for our talk today is how to be the 5%. And why how to be the 5% is frankly because that's about the percentage of digital transformations that succeed. It's about 5%. When you look at all the research that has been done, and I'm not sure if it's been done by our folks at Carey as well, but if I look at folks like McKinsey, I look at MIT, I look at Harvard Business Review, consistently, the number of digital transformations that succeed is about 5 to 30% on the high end. So overwhelmingly, they tend to fail. So what we'll talk about tonight, ideally, is both sides of that coin, why they fail and also why they succeed, and also some of the tools and technologies and thought processes you can use to help improve the likelihood of success. And to join me for that, as I said, online first is Jen Jones. And Jen's technical title is the Managing Director of Brand Experience, and she's our lead user experience strategist at Veracity. Hopefully you had a chance to take a look at when you signed up for the presentation today. More on her bio, so I won't read that out to you, but a couple of key points. She's an award-winning creative director. And so she came from the agency side of the house and brings that mindset to a lot of our projects in technology, which, as you might imagine, is somewhat rare. A lot of technology projects are technology and creative tends to be siloed over here. She really blends both of those right and left brain together. And she's been in the business for about 25 years, if not more at this point. And she's also joining us from Richmond, Virginia, which is also where I am based. So she's joining us this evening. It's, what is it, 8:30 there, I think, Jen. So thank you very much for being there in the evening and joining us. And also, I guess, as I said, she's really a brilliant strategist at blending both the brand as well as technology. So please, if you could join me in welcoming Jen Jones.
Thanks for having me.
And we can hear you. So great, technology is working. I love it. Love it when a plan comes together. That is good. All right, and also joining us, we've got Patrick Brown, another one of my colleagues from Veracity, and he's joining us from, I think it's Nashville, right, Patrick?
That is
where you are
correct.
today? All right, great. So we've got all kinds of geographies covered today. And Patrick is another one of my colleagues, as I said. He's an information technology consultant and portfolio manager. The portfolio he manages for Veracity is one of our lead customers, which is the Veterans Administration, is specifically that portfolio. We do a lot of work with the VA that hopefully he'll have a chance to share some examples of what we're doing there as it relates to digital transformation. He's been in this world for about 15 years. He focuses on portfolio management, application development, and quality assurance as part of his background. And also he's, as I said, currently engaged at the VA. Prior to that, he worked with a lot of Fortune 5 companies down to working with nonprofits. So one large nonprofit you're probably familiar with is the Girl Scouts of America. So a pretty broad portfolio from nonprofit to private as well as VA. So please join me in welcoming Patrick Brown. All right, then our local guys, we got, first I'll introduce Mark, because he's got a fine first name, I think. He's a little different than the picture you may have seen in the introduction or when you signed up. He had a beard, so he got rid of the facial hair for us this evening, cleaned himself up for us, and then lost 40 pounds as well along the way, right? So that Vietnamese food treated you very well, I think, over there. Oh. Hopefully no one else in this room picked up those 40 pounds that you lost. But so Mark, again, I'm not going to read everything on his bio, but he's a chief technology officer. He's been in that world for a long time. Most recently, he was with a startup as a CTO, responsible for driving and scaling the organization, leading them through a digital transformation with a fintech organization located in Southeast Asia that also went through an IPO. So a lot of great experience in there, I think, that he's going to be able to share with us. Prior to that, he spent some time as an SVP of engineering for American Express and also spent some time with a Ticketmaster. So a couple of large organizations as well. So please join me in welcoming Mark to our panel as well. Right, and our last panelist this evening is Peter Robinson, and Peter is the VP of Digital Enablement here in town with the Avnet, at least a locally based organization. But if you haven't had a chance to speak with him, he's got a great background. I think he's worked all over the world in his 25-year or so career with Avnet. In this case, started with them in Australia, right? Spent some time in Australia, then went over to Singapore, and then eventually came to Phoenix. So lots of exotic places, I think, which has been great so far in your career. So please join me in welcome your last panelist this evening, Peter Robinson. That's right. And as you walk up to the bar, you will be on camera. So we'll follow you as well to see what kind of beverage you get and what you take back to your seat this evening. So thank you very much for making that note. So I'll also encourage you, we'll have Q&A formally at the end of the conversation, but we'd like this really to be a conversation. So I've got some prepared questions that we pulled together to speak to that we think are very applicable, but also encourage you to ask your own questions along the way so we can address those, but we will formally do it at the end. But if you have a question that comes to you, if you're like me, if I don't write it down, or ask it right away, it quick to escape me. So please do feel free to ask questions at any point. But let me start our first question. And Jen Jones, I'm going to start with you for this question. And that is the key question. The topic today is, why do most digital transformations fail? So in your experience, Jen, why don't you share with us what you've seen as far as why most digital transformations fail?
Well, I think that this is a great question, first of all, to start with, but I think ultimately it comes down to oftentimes when people start a transformation or when organizations start a transformation, they start with sort of the what and the how. So what technology do we need? How are we going to do this? Ultimately, what's our roadmap? What data do we need to collect, as opposed to focusing on the why and the who? And to be really more specific, really putting people at the center of your transformation, I think is the first thing. And even if you look at kind of, everybody's seen the graphic, right? The 3 prongs of transformation: people, process, and technology. But I think that really fundamentally, they aren't weighted. They aren't the same, right? Ultimately, I think it's actually big people, simple processes, and technology that connects is actually what makes transformation successful. And I think even, if you even think about, we've done a lot of talking on this topic, Mark, you and I have actually over the last couple of years. And I really think as we've looked at more and more transformations, either some successful, some, but most, I think it's like 70% are moderately successful, really. I mean, even it, are really not even successful. But if you really look at that, I think it really comes down to, it's like we focus so much on technology and more specifically on actual tactical experiences, like a customer facing touch point. And we can understand that, okay, if this is broken and somebody can't log in or they can't do something, then yes, we need to fix this. But we often forget that missing link, that on the other side of maybe a terrible customer experience is probably an equally terrible employee experience. And I think really employees and employee experience is really at the heart of how to make transformation successful. And if you really think about it, it goes back to service design, and it's really looking at the entire life cycle of something from beginning to end. And so it's not just solving these point solutions of, oh, let me go get technology and retrofit my processes or retrofit my people into that technology, or vice versa. Let me correct my processes and then, kind of retrofit. It's really looking at that total life cycle and starting with the end user and starting with all the actors involved. And so those are all the people that service the customer. In fact, not just if you think about customer experience in general, like the number 2 reason why people, dislike a company is because of failed services, like a late bill, a horrible call center experience, so on and so forth. And so I think it's all the people, the big people involved in transformation. And that is both externally your end users and internally your users that are supporting. So I like to say customer facing and customer impacting, and really thinking through both sides of that coin when you think about transformation. So for me, it's the people.
Great. Thank you, Jen. And I'll stay on the Zoom. As a matter of fact, Patrick, why don't you address the same question? So from your point of view, why do most digital transformations tend to fail?
There are a lot of reasons why, Mark, they fail, and I could talk about any number of them for an hour. Jen kind of stole my answer, so I'm really not. No, I'm just kidding, Jen. You didn't steal my answer. I would say another good example of why digital transformations fail, probably lack of architecture runway. I have a lot of experience where I was called in as a consultant sort of after the fact, right? There was a digital transformation that failed. And often one of the reasons was somebody was chasing a shiny penny and they really wanted this thing and they started to act on it very quickly. And they went out and they bought a SaaS product, or they bought, a platform as a service, and they were ready to go. And they realized they couldn't integrate with anything. They didn't have teams, or they didn't have the infrastructure built to actually support the tools that they bought. They were just stuck. And so, unfortunately, as a consultant, oftentimes when I, went in to work with a client, I would say, okay, guys, we got to take a step back. We need to do these 10 things first. You need to get your architecture runway built out, and then you can start, implementing these products that you built. So again, there are lots of different examples or reasons why they failed, but, there's one that I have direct experience with.
Great. All right. So we've gotten 2 responses so far for you guys to think about, right? And I'll reverse the order and mix things up, so you don't have to say ditto as we come around, as can happen sometimes in panel discussions. So really keeping the end user in mind, making sure you've got the right architectural runway. Yes. Yeah, great question. So let me repeat the question. And the question is, the predecessor to the question was, we got a table of old men here, but I'll just share that with the audience. So self-identified, but also really, how do we define digital transformation? And I think digital transformation, in my mind, and this would be a great question for our panelists as well, from my point of view, it is very broad. I think, the digital transformation is nothing new. I think we've been transforming digitally far before there was the internet. Really, when computers came to the fore, I think is when we started to truly digitally transform. So it could be taking a manual process and automating that process is one form of transformation, to fully moving your organization from on-site equipment to off-site or to the cloud, and really anything in between. But most often I see it when it comes to digitizing or automating business processes is kind of in the middle, in my mind, I think. But it can be very broad and all-encompassing, would be my perspective. But let me go ahead and maybe cycle that question around to our panels as well. So Peter, let me hand the mic to you, see how you would define that.
Yeah, and our CEO recently told me that it's my job to work that out. I think it's a tough question. And one of the, hearing that conversation, one things for me that's been really, I think, challenging for us is around trying to solve everything and call it all as digital transformation. So one of the things with my title is actually I put digital enablement. Our job is to enable things and help the business units and the different parts of the organization be successful and build platforms and tools that can enable them to solve a wide range of problems, right? And I think that's one of the big challenges, because you do end up with everything is digital. And then as we go out to our different business units and parts of them, there's people buying all kinds of tools and they're all solving stuff digitally. So we do come back and say it's very broad, but I would say that the big takeaway, I think we're focused on the moment where we've had kind of a lot of success is out talking to partners of how do we connect with them digitally? How do we do things that we couldn't do in the past, right? Where we're limited by technology. So things like B2B or EDI, where you're limited by the constraints of those message types, where you go to something like APIs, you're kind of unconstrained. You can do a hell of a lot more and transmit and pass different information and entangle more processes. So, I mean, for us, it's a big question. As I said, something that we're very focused on. I think the other big thing for us that we think around is a product mindset. So we're not sitting back waiting for requests from the business or deliver projects. We actually have a product roadmap for digital products that we identify and say, here is a capability or a product that our customers want. And then we lay out a roadmap from an IT side and actually put ownership around that, versus I think the typical side where you have an IT shop, you wait for the business to come and bring you a project, and then you deliver that project. And when it's done, you're done. But you measure success in terms of engagement of those things versus the project delivery.
I would say that if I were to summarize what is digital transformation, it's customer obsession, period. Right? Like the problem has been, and I'm going to mix the two questions together, has been that what you want to be able to do is meet the customer where they're at, right? If they're on their mobile phone all day, why the hell are you sending them paper statements, right? As an example, right? Like it doesn't make any sense. And you get in these situations, and this is kind of where what I see go wrong a lot of times is there's a lot of culture, right? So the big P people concept, right? It's like, how do you get people to think beyond the job that you've given them for the last 30 years, right? They've been pushing this button. How do you get them to innovate, right? And part of that is when you push that button, what does that do to the customer? How does that impact them? What's the value for the customer in pushing that button? Do you need to push the button? I think there was a show called Lost way back when, where somebody had to push a button. It was like a smoke monster. But thankfully, right, the companies that are getting this right are really understanding it's about the culture of the organization. It's how you think about your customer. It's how you use your data. And how do you enable your employees to be continuously improving? Because guess what? There's this little thing called AI out there, right? That's not the end of the transformation. It does not end, right? So if you don't build that culture of continuous improvement, continuous learning, so that your employee population can learn, they can understand where the customers are going, where they're going to be, and how to utilize technology and data in a way that's successful, you're going to be stuck and you're going to be lagging behind others that are doing it well. And I think this is, to me, what the biggest blocker is how do you get an organization to shift in that model and that mindset? And you know, obviously, hopefully we'll talk more about that.
Me pass on the same question to Patrick. How would you define or put parameters around digital transformation?
You know, that's an interesting question. I agree with you that it's very broad. It's funny because in preparation for this meeting, I actually looked it up. I looked up the definition, and by and large, what the consensus is it's really any technology that's enabling you to function better as a company and serve your customer. You know, period, full stop. So it could be going from, you have an employee who's in a swivel chair scenario and getting them to where they're focusing on one application. It can be getting away from paper and going to a more automated process. At the end of the day, if you're enabling, your internal customers to function better and more efficiently to provide whatever that service is for the end user, it's considered a digital transformation.
Thank you very much. Jen, same question. How would you define digital transformation?
I mean, I think we've probably covered it to some degree, but I actually did want to kind of couple the statement. I can't, and by the way, I can't, you guys are very small in our video thing. So I'm not sure if it was Peter or Mark that was talking about culture, but I really couldn't agree more. I mean, in thinking about we did this project for customer experience strategy, and it was really kind of digital transformation of their entire customer experience strategy. But we didn't really, having worked with the organization for 10 years and really looking at where they failed just in a regular like website build or an e-commerce build or something, it was really like culturally where they failed. They were very autonomous culture, very old school, really built around kind of more of a sales culture as opposed to digital tools and enablement. And what we ran across the customer experience strategy was a business agility strategy, which was really helping them set up a portfolio, helping them set up, basically ways that they can actually be strategic, combine their budgets, do portfolio simulations, roadmap together. But I think neither one of those in service of each other are actually very helpful. So if we had just done business agility, great. People would have been learning really nothing, but coupling that with a customer experience strategy where we actually did the user research, we had HR, we had finance, we had their opcos, we had sales in the room, we had marketing, we had IT in the room, and they actually had to go through the process of understanding the personas, go through the process of journey mapping, understand the gaps along the journey. It was so eye-opening to me of like, this is really the right way to do it, because culture is actually, I totally agree with that statement, because for instance, one of the biggest gaps in their customer experience strategy was, wow, all of our competitors have digital onboarding for our customers. You can literally go online, fill out a form online, basically get your order in the matter of like 48 hours, right? Before your credit check. The way their company worked, and they're number 3 in the US market, the way theirs worked, you still had to print out a form, fax it in, wait until your credit check went through, and then you would become a customer and get your order. So everybody's like, oh my gosh, we should change this. And finance is like, as we're talking through this, finance is in the room. They're part of this transformation. They're part of this business agility. And they're like, oh, well, we just bought a tool that could have actually solved this problem, but we bought it for something else. So now we're going to have to try to get out of that contract. But it's just eye-opening that's really, I think the comment about culture is really what breaks it. It's like, if everybody's not invested in being customer obsessed and actually understanding who your customer is, and it's not marketing, it's not IT, because that's the other thing you always learn in these transformations. Everybody's like, IT is like, well, my customer is marketing, so they're going to tell me what I need to build or what I need to do. No, everybody's customer is, the end user and the person that they're servicing. And if everybody can be in service of that and understand where the gaps, where the journey is and all those types of things, then ultimately everybody can be kind of in the same way. And I think business agility just in general, thinking through like how you actually get more agile and iterative, how you actually plan together. So, the first part of that was actually the customer experience, having them all learn. And then we went through kind of the portfolio simulations and even them going through their roadmaps. It's so crazy to me how many organizations put money into like, okay, they're doing IT, brought their stuff to the portfolio simulation, to the roadmap thing. And they have things like ERP upgrades. They couldn't even explain why they were doing them. And so they had millions of dollars sitting there that could have been spent on these actual real customer problems that were going to, just line item budgets. And so being able to actually plan together as a larger organization, they were able to take those line item budgets, say, let's stop doing these things and let's actually put this money to these larger visions that we just worked on together. So I just wanted to say that. I didn't really answer your question about digital transformation. I think we've answered that, but I couldn't agree more with about customer obsession and culture.
Well, and along those lines, that's a good segue into my next question, which is really the opposite of why do most digital transformations fail? And we've touched on some of these, but maybe to drill down on a bit more. What makes them most successful? How have you seen digital transformations be successful, and what really led to that success? Again, we've touched on a few more of those, so I want to offer you the opportunity to add some more, maybe share a different example of that. So what makes them successful? Start.
So one of the areas where I've seen huge amounts of success is taking people that already know the business really well and upskilling and cross-skilling them. So they're able to come in and add all of their existing knowledge and bring that to a new technology. So I've seen other sites where you bring in, brand new so-called digital consultant teams that don't augment the team, completely replace the internal team with an external team. And then when they leave, it just dies out. Because I've seen huge success where train up the team. They're able to bring, all their ideas and things they've solved over the years, but solve them in different ways, right? And again, they come with huge amounts of business knowledge, huge amounts of knowledge about the data. I'm truly understanding the customers. And in our business, suppliers are as important as customers because we're a distributor. So understanding that nuance as well is very, very important that our team brings to the table.
I think, one of the key things, and Jen talked about business agility, right? So I think most of you are probably going through some agile transformation as well, right? Maybe a workforce transformation, maybe a something else transformation. At the end of the day, right, it's about doing things in small ways, in iterative ways, gaining insights from the data that you receive from that and making small adjustments so that you can quickly iterate and learn. You know, the biggest pain point that I've seen, at least in my career, as I've gone through and had these move, you know, software X to software Y and call it a transformation, is that you're really not innovating, right? You're just moving into the next version of some software, and the value is not understood by anybody, right? It's something that gets done, and certainly it has some value, potentially a cost savings or there's some value there, but it doesn't address the fact that really you don't know what your customer wants because it's changing. And the smartest person in the room can't make all the decisions about how the UI should be, you know, the login screen should look, how this should look, how that should look. And sometimes I think it's in the hierarchical organizations that happens, right? You know, the IT is waiting for somebody to tell them what to do is a great indicator of that. If that's happening, likely you're just going to deliver on something that's not going to meet the customer needs, right? So really it's getting that, you know, ThoughtWorks has a great model. It's like 4 in the box. Ticketmaster used this, Adam, I believe, right? And the thinking is that you get the UX person, you get the engineer, you get a project manager, you get, you know, the 4 people that are just working the problem as a product driven organization, drive it, have some KPIs that you're going after, and always release software often, right? Heck, if you can release daily, even better, right? For those organizations that have that ability. The more you do that, the more you get those insights back, the more you can change as your customer changes. And as new technology comes to bear and brings new capabilities, it puts you in a good spot and builds you a strong team that's able to change often, right? Because that's really what we are. We're change people, right? We do change. And I think that's really the answer, in my opinion.
4 in the box. I like that. It sounds like a cage match. Project management could be entertaining. That could be, but I've heard it is very effective. Actually, it's a great tool. All right, Patrick, how about you? Same question. What do you think leads to digital transformation success?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything that I've heard so far. You know, one of the last statements that was just made was about change, and I would like to reference change management. You know, whether you're building a product internally or externally, you know, you can't touch every person who's going to use that product. So sometimes, you know, people are caught off guard based on these transformations that are being made, when in fact, really what you're trying to do is add value for them. If you don't, you know, approach them with that change before it gets there, that can really backfire on you. And I've seen that happen, you know, at one example, when I was with AIG, bless these ladies' hearts, there was a team of ladies. They had been working there for the longest tenure was 45 years. She had spent her whole life there. And we were taking something to the cloud, and she just was completely flustered and didn't really know what to do. And that really, you know, was an example of, gosh, we could have gotten ahead of this. We really could have helped her, you know, understand the changes to the product, how it was going to affect her job, how it was going to be beneficial to her. And in fact, we did, you know, in the end. But making sure that we, you know, set expectations and meet those expectations for, you know, the consumer of whatever it is that's being built, it's absolutely a key to success.
Great. That person sounds familiar to a lot of folks I heard in my background. Actually, part of my background, I was the CEO of the largest pediatric medical group in Virginia before I joined Veracity. And I remember the biggest indicator of a physician's retiring was being forced to use an EMR. When they were forced to use electronic medical records, a lot of them said, you know, I've been here for 45 years, I'll go ahead and opt out and I'll leave and retire. And instead of having to learn new technologies, that's a pretty common challenge as well. Jen, same question. So touching on some additional indicators, what makes a digital transformation successful?
I mean, I think, you know, honestly, service design, if I want to be totally thinking about like the entire, you know, I mean, think about your best customer experience. Think about your best like digital experience. It's likely Amazon. It's not because they have a great website. I mean, their website, you know, the UI of it is actually not even that exciting. But if you think about when I order a product, all the things that get, you know, shot off, you know, like the ability for it to be there the next day, the ability for me to go to my local Whole Foods and return it, getting refunded within the matter of 4 hours once they, you know, it starts tracking, you know, that is a good customer experience, right? That is a good transformation from a digital standpoint. And I think if you think about that, what they didn't do is they didn't think about a point solution. And I think what you see a lot of times is, as an organization, and we've kind of even hit on this several times, you know, I'm going to buy a technology or I'm going to do a website. and it's going to be great, right? I'm going to make it beautiful. I'm going to make the touch points on it awesome. But then what happens next? Like, what happens when I go to your website and fill out a form? Does anybody respond to me? You know, what happens when I order a product? Can I return it as easily as I can at Amazon? Ultimately, it's that entire kind of, you know, from start to finish. And I think when you work in transformational work like this, oftentimes you will hear people say like, well, I don't own that product, or I don't own that part of the journey. So we're really just focused here. But for a customer, they don't see it like that. It's from start to finish. And I think service design really looks at not just an end user experience, so not just the customer journey, but they actually look at all the actors involved from a front stage and backstage standpoint. So like, who is the call center agent? You know, where does this initiate a process, and then where does it go next in the company? And then how is that service, and who's servicing that, and what tool is servicing that? And so that way, you know that, hey, your website might start on Sitecore or Adobe, but then all your backend stuff is going through all these other different tools and technologies, touching all these different people in the organization. And are those touch points broken? And so that is, I think, ultimately what's going to make it successful, is looking at the entire journey of a process, the entire journey of a service or an order from start to finish, and thinking through how you can improve that. And look, it's big. Transformation is big. And I think when people start hearing things like that, they're like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of work. Start small. Look at one journey, you know, from start to finish, you know, one thing. How can I improve, you know, a claim, or how can I improve, you know, this type of order or something like that? Or how can I improve form? And look at all the touch points. And what do I need to do there? You don't have to do it all at once. In fact, that's probably another key area of how you're not going to be successful. But let's look at what are the places where we're failing the hardest, and start there.
Great. Thank you. And you touched on my next question. I'm going to toss this out to really any of the panelists to respond to it. But maybe talking about some specific tools that you might use as well. You mentioned some journey mapping, for example, personas in the service design field, but I'm curious, in addition to those or independent of those, are there other tools that you've seen used very effectively when it comes to digital transformations? So anybody would like to tackle that question first?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Something that's worked a couple of times for me that I would give to anybody, culture hacking, which is really starting really small in an area that you have some, because like a lot of times you're juggling 15 things and you don't have the ability to transform at the same speed, right? So let's be honest, there's a day job and then there's this idea that you want to transform. But this idea of culture hacking, which really allows you to take a small group of people to go after something in a very different way of thinking, a different approach. And that could be, you know, things like, we're not going to have meetings. This group's going to do a stand up and they're going to do their thing, and they're going to use Slack or MS Teams to get back together. And they're going to go after this customer in a very specific new way. And we're going to give them the autonomy to do that. And then we're just going to observe, right? Get feedback from the customer, feedback from data, and use that as a way to show, you know, go back to that change management moment. It's a small win. Or if it's not a win, what did you learn from that? And how do you take that into the next hack that you do? Because you a lot of times you just can't change. You're definitely not going to change everything, but there are areas of playing around that you can do in a way to see what's going to work for your organization, because your organization has constraints, right? What's worked for your people, the type of business that you run has a very unique way of working. How can you maneuver in the space and use that as a way to kind of test and learn? And I've seen it to be very effective in different organizations, different size organizations to be helpful.
Well,
like a waiter as soon as you take a drink. So we'll go to Patrick. Patrick.
I'll just say very quickly, again, I very much agree with that. You know, Mark, you ask about tools, whatever tool works. So, you know, I mean, really, you've got to, you know, pretty much anything that you want out there, right? But it's really based on the team, how they work together. What as humans do they, you know, how do they want to engage and interact with each other? I love the idea of culture hacking. Makes, you know, 100% sense. But in my experience, every client is different. They all have different processes. And I had the ability to go in there and say, okay, well, based on the way that you guys want to do this and you guys want to do this, how about we try to adopt this tool? And we would try some and they'd work, and we would try some and they didn't. But we would keep going until we found one that allowed us to be, you know, efficient and collaborate together.
Right. Jen?
Well, I think that the director of research on my team would say not every problem is a nail, so not every solution is a hammer. So I think to what Patrick was saying, I think it's the best tool that meets the need. But I think generally speaking, we have certain frameworks that we start with. And I think if you really think about it, you got to start first with, the end user, and that user can be, or just the user. Because I think ultimately when you think about service design, there's a lot of different actors involved, and actors indicate that you're not just talking about the actual consumer, but you're actually talking about the people that service as well. So start with empathy, do empathy mapping. You need to do some form of user research. I mean, that can be surveys, that can be focus groups, that can be ethnographic studies, basically do ride-alongs, go listen to your call center staff. I mean, actually do get behind them. I mean, we do a lot of different types of digital transformation. And I think one of the most telling things is you oftentimes will think it's a tech problem or an experience problem. And then if you go sit behind the person doing the work, it's like they don't have internet access or they haven't been trained on the tool. I mean, it's so many other things than just the actual physical experience. So use some type of, user research methodology. And again, we have so many different kind of methodologies that we would use depending on what the user problem we're trying to figure out. And then you would go into like journey mapping or service blueprints, and then ultimately user flows when we're actually getting into how we're going to do the experience. And then, rapid prototyping is always a good thing. Participatory design is another one. We use that a lot, especially when we actually are trying to kind of get people to think through concepts, because a lot of times things can be too abstract for, the general public, or, for even people within an organization. So sometimes it's good to just get some rapid stuff on paper and actually help them think. I mean, we've solved some of our most interesting kind of experience transformations that way, of just having people say, well, here's how I would do it manually. And then trying to think through, okay, how would we actually create that digitally, or what would that look like? So I mean, and so those are all kinds of tools that we use within just our normal kind of frameworks to get to the end.
Great.
Or get to the next step, I guess, because transformation never really ends.
I think one small thing, I like what Mark said, especially around starting small and getting something moving. And I think one of the things that worked well, that I've seen work well, is when team members don't get too obsessed between there's 5 possible technologies I could use to, or products I could use to solve this. Which one should I pick? And spending a huge amount of time trying to pick one, move forward. In our case, we picked Azure as a platform and said, we're going to do everything that we can natively in Azure. So we don't have to spend time trying to analyze in order to get that initial project up and running. Because we actually, one point, didn't even have a cloud applications team. We took one person, and then 12 months later, that team had 13 people in it, because we started small, tiny projects, and we repurposed those people from existing roles, right? We didn't even have to hire other people. So again, I think the starting small and moving quickly and being able to fail is important.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Pretty much here about transformation of kind of a simplistic environment, say, where you have a single customer or an individual figured out there. What about the more complex ones where you're dealing with maybe some supply chain or those kind of things, where you can get their problems come into your organization? How do you deal with those situations in that kind of a context?
So just to repeat the question as well, to make sure that our folks online heard as well, right? So we've talked a lot about what looks to be more of a simple kind of a one-to-one type of digital transformation. How do you manage larger, more complex digital transformations, especially where outside entities are involved? And so really, their problems become your problems when they come into your organization. Is that fair characterization? Great. So who'd like to tackle that one first?
I think it depends on the size of the problem you're having. So one of the areas where we've had some success is, again, thinking around platforms, right? Platforms that enable us to build on and build a bunch of capabilities. So as we started building out new kind of, I'd say, new internal services, et cetera, as we started working with our partners, they came in and they're actually started to bring us problems as we started sharing some of our digital capabilities. They then brought us some of those additional problems that we're able to plug into our existing platforms and expand on top of. And we have had quite a bit of this recently, especially with just in the semiconductor industry, all kind of supply chain constraints, huge volumes of price updates, changes, lead time changes. So we actually found we were able to use kind of the building blocks we had to build new services for those partners.
How do you do similar to change control mechanisms? Because if you go in with the first set of assumptions, then they make changes, your assumptions are no longer valid. So how would you incorporate a mechanism or whatever methodologies or to handle it?
Yeah, and those we work very closely with the partners in terms of these changes. So they bring those changes to us, talk about what they want to change. And obviously the challenge is it's just about the partnership. I think that's the biggest piece. I think in the B2B type world before, where those changes would actually take a really long time, I think in this scenario, we're able to work quickly and faster with our partners than we were in the past. But you're right, it's definitely a challenge. I can tell you, we've had issues where we implement B2B type stuff and people are using codes that we put from our system in their system, and then all the B2B mappings and whatnot fail. So I think that's a big challenge of that linkage and how to keep it loosely coupled.
Well,
I think this is a great conversation because this really opens up a big spider web of events. But this goes to enterprise architecture and having a really solid definition of what your enterprise architecture looks like, so that when you do implement these snippets of improvements, that you do understand the effect beforehand and afterhand of your change. And a lot of organizations are not that well documented to understand what you're getting ready to implement. So what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, from my perspective, you know, EA is having a strategy is important, right? But like the execution is where things fail. I was an architect in a prior life and had great strategies. And I was like, I felt like the Marines hitting the beach, and I was like, where's the army? Like, they're nowhere to be found, right? So I think a lot of the problems, if you go back to the concept of digital transformation, if you've got a supply chain problem, you've got a partner issue, you've got two choices. I think you bring them along, but you bring it in house, right? Look at the companies that are doing it well. The Amazon example, they brought logistics in house, right? Like that's how they're trying to solve the customer pain point, because the customer doesn't give a rat's ass. If it's your supply chain issue, they're looking at you, right? And that's where they're making that decision. So obviously that's a simplistic answer to a really difficult problem, because you don't have the opportunity to do that in all cases, but that's really what you want. You want to have the right partners at the table with you. And if you don't have the right partners, get a new one. I mean, I think that's the thinking, if you can, right? Obviously there's a lot of big issues. I'll stop.
Jen or Patrick, you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I don't disagree with sort of the comment of, I think first you have to actually truly understand the problem, because I think what a lot of times, especially at the beginning of transformations, people blame the other guy. You know, they're like, oh, it's our partner. It's the partner's experience is broken. Or, you know, so we oftentimes go into these things with a very limited view of what truly is the problem. So I think first kind of pulling back and really dissecting that journey to really understand where the problem lies. And it might also lie with the organization too, the original organization, not just the partner. I would actually bring the partner along. If that's not possible, we actually, one of the projects I was talking about earlier, it's for a national car rental place. And they have a basically fleet management software, and they have a horrible time with it. And their key thing that they said is, we probably can't change this software. We cannot change this partner. They won't work with us. So what can we do to improve basically our experience for our employees to actually make this work for us? So knowing going in, we're not going to be able to redesign this. So we've got to figure out how we can actually improve it. And that's when I was talking about the diary studies, like going in and actually sitting behind the people in the car rental place and watching them do it. There was actually so much bigger problems. That's what I'm saying. It wasn't just the partner problem. It wasn't just the tool problem. I mean, they didn't have internet. You know, they weren't trained on the software. And there were so many other things we were actually able to identify that was outside of that partner relationship that couldn't change, that was rigid, that they could actually change. They could actually affect as the organization. And so my first thing is, don't always assume it's the other guy, and don't always assume that it's one thing. Oftentimes there's so many broken things, and it could be that the partner doesn't actually know what the actual journey is. So they're servicing the wrong things too, you know? So like ultimately really looking at that entire supply chain, or that entire kind of chain of events, and really understanding kind of whose responsibility it is, you know, obviously see if they'll work with you. But I go to the last point too, after you kind of exhausted those methods, and if it's still breaking your customer experience, then, you know, bring it in-house, look for a new partner. I mean, those are all things to consider as well. But I think probably rudimentary, it's not just the partner problem, would be my assumption. It's never that simplistic.
Patrick, did you want to add anything to that question?
Well, I just want to make sure that we're still on the same question. I think this is about enterprise architecture. I think that it was Mark who said, sorry, again, I have the same small window that Jen does, but I think it was Mark that said, often the challenge is the breakdowns really with delivery and not necessarily EA. And I definitely agree with that. I will say, with the absence of a good EA strategy, bad decisions are made. So, not only could the delivery teams not build something correctly, but they may build the wrong thing. And even if they build it, correctly or incorrectly, it's still wrong. So, EA is, in my opinion, is super critical.
Yes.
One of the themes I'm hearing from our panelists and some of our other speakers is really a transparency. Sorry, I'm hearing myself twice. Transparency of information, because even if EA has a great strategy, maybe our execution team doesn't know what that strategy is. So that's where that breakdown comes through. Or maybe the information's available, but it's not structured in a way that the person who needs to action it can understand. And we see that a lot in project management. I spend all day trying to translate business, technology, and executive speak all through the life cycle of the project.
I think that's a great point.
I agree. Well, Simon, I want to be sensitive to our time. So we have time for one more question. Is that okay? Fantastic. And was it Matthew, right? I'm going to call on you because you asked a great question earlier. I want to make sure you, and I'm going to call you out. If you don't volunteer, you get voluntold is the way it works. So I thought you asked a great question. I'd like you to share it, please.
Okay, yes. So I work at an insurance company. We're growing, right? And so we have our core system, which is where our insurance system, insurance processes live, policy, claims, billing, all of that. All of the changes in that space are well defined. We have a backlog for like 5 years. We're good. It's outside of the core systems that I see tremendous opportunity. The frontline employees, the people that are dealing with the claims, the people that are dealing with the billing, the people that are doing the underwriting, not inside of the system, because there are business processes that are outside of the core system. They're the frontline processes that they do before they hit the core system. I know there is opportunity there, but what I would like to know is what's the best starting point to really do the legwork to find those people? Because we have, we're regional, right? I'm not going to be able to go on a plane and go to all of our locations, but I need to start somewhere. What's the best way to start in order to find those opportunities? And they're not going to be massive opportunities, but they are opportunities. And I think they are numerous. So what's the best starting point for something like that?
I'll just throw out, we actually kind of against the same problem statement for a national insurance agency. We just did to help with their claims modernization. We just did a service blueprinting project, and it was really focused on, again, kind of going back to what you're talking about, which is you might have specific experience improvements or technical improvements in the technology, but a lot of the problems lie outside of the people that support, the processes and the journey kind of throughout. And that's actually what service design does, is it's identifying not just the tools, technology, it does those things too, but it's actually identifying all the servicing mechanisms that happened through a life cycle of a claim or through the life cycle of whatever that might be. And so I think, like, where are you having your most problems, I would be asked. So think of like the micro journey you could start with, like the simplest one that's like, if we could fix this, and it could be your smallest one, it would improve, a ton of things. Start there. And then actually, what you can start simplistically first identifying like what are the parts of that journey. And then ultimately it's about working with all of the actors, all the people, all the tools, all the things that actually service that throughout that process, and really figuring out what are the pain points, sitting with them. It could be that they don't have the right software to actually service the customer. They don't have, like they're not connected to some of your other systems, so they're not getting the point in time that they need. There's all types of things that you usually uncover in that, but ultimately service design is actually what we've used to do almost the exact same project for a different insurer just recently.
Great. Other comments from other panelists?
And I think that's the right approach when it comes to systematically going after it. And honestly, pick the easiest one, just do it, figure it out. Because what you have behind you, you said insurance, and I'm at a lot of assumptions. You've got a culture of risk averseness, right? You've got things that haven't been done maybe in a way that you'd like them to be done. So part of this is yes, you want to go after the customer. Who is your customer in this context? And find something that, as a leader, right? Because this is the problem. Hierarchies and leaders and cultures, right? It's hard to make a difference when you're somewhere in the middle, right? Or even if you're at the top and you've got to influence, 20 other partners. Find something that you can control and show that you can do something small and generate that excitement about it. Because I think that's the spark that you can use to take onto whatever approach you take using the service mapping and the deep, break the system down, spend a year analyzing it, come up with a deep EA stuff. I mean, that's all good stuff and good tools to do. But I think if I'm going after that, I'm picking something that I see as a low hanging fruit. If I can use that,
Nothing to add.
So something else to think about. I had a similar challenge in a company that I was running, and we were opportunistic in the way that a lot of our billable employees, we measured their time ticket to ticket all day long. And the way that I had our CTO focus was to go pick the tasks that caused the most amount of time in a week of an employee and start with automating those first, right? So we went through in a little ways, picked the easiest one first. And that no other reason, that's how we addressed it. And it did two things. One, it improved the life of that employee because they're like, oh my God, I used to spend 4 hours a week doing this, pushing this one button, and now it's gone. And so you get a champion there. And then I was able to do more work with the same amount of employees. So it was better for our bottom line as well. So that was just a very low level approach, but it worked very quickly. And we built a surge. The employees are like, and then they got better in logging their time because they realized we were focusing on the tasks that were time logged. And so it then created other better habits that the employees were much more accurate in how they logged their tasks during the day because they were hoping that their monotonous tasks would get automated next. So it kind of snowballed like that.
That's great. That's a great example.
Well, with that, I'd like everyone to please thank our panelists. So Jen, Patrick remotely, and then Peter and Mark here in person.
Thank you guys. Have a great night.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Mark, thank you so much for that. Yep. Pick a small thing and transform it, like buying Taylor Swift tickets. But that was after your time. After your time. Absolutely. I know. I'll always go on about that with you, Mark. So who's Taylor Swift? Sorry, this is this table here. That sort of concludes the formal part of the agenda. I hope you really enjoyed that. It was good fun. Thanks so much for the folks that joined us remotely as well. That was really good. The AV worked very well. Bob, thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate that. I also forgot to mention this man here who's now moving the chairs, Michael Paradise, because he was actually sponsoring our badges tonight. So thank you very much, which is very nice because he's actually the director of sponsorships. So see, drinking his own champagne, as we say. All right. Anyway, the bar remains open.